boy, good morning. Glad we had Crash Murder Coffee. I don't get up at 6 in the morning. Anyway, good morning, and let's give an extra applause to Mr. Chris Riggins. I want to thank CreativeMornings Santa Fe for having me as their first 2025 guest today. So Happy New Year's, everybody. My focus this morning is to share some of my personal journeys spanning the 80s and the 90s to current, working with various diverse ethnicities of children, teenagers, and young adults within art settings in Santa Fe, the Santa Fe Rail Yard, and our city different Plaza. Today we are in the Santa Fe Rail Yard at the Vladimir Contemporary. I spent a lot of time in this rail yard growing up as a kid because my grandparents owned a big house down the street on Montezuma across from the VFW. With many rascal cousins, we would hang out in the rail yard creating havoc like jumping trains. We were fascinated with tar bubbling up from the ground, and when we came back to Grandma's, guess what we smelled like? Railroad ties. How many of you today have teenagers? They're all grown up, huh? We're the Santa Feans of, okay. Well, do you remember your challenge to transition from older childhood to wannabe adult? I often described some adolescents as adults in essence. Why? Because they acted older than they actually were. Some adults in essence were prodigies, some were rebellious, and some with puberty issues. My journey in the 20th century from 1980 to 1989. In 1982, I was a single mom, and Santa Fe lacked artistic programs for kids. I was also working as a registered nurse, as an adolescent psychiatric nurse in the locked wards of adolescents. When we started to discharge these teenagers back into their same dysfunctional families, I said, that just doesn't seem right. So I kind of wanted to do something for local kids in our community. So I started a neighborhood club, and it was called the Kids Actors Workshop. And I had neighborhood kids come along, and they did acting, poetry, and art, and they performed at nursing homes. In 1983, my son at the age of 8, he was a young breakdancer. He and his friends would drag their cardboard boxes from the Sears dumpsters and would breakdance in the plaza next to the obelisk with their blasting boom boxes. Well, one day while sitting on a plaza bench, I was watching them pop and spin. Then some teenagers defined as the punkers rolled in with their multiple piercings, mohawks, tattoos, and studded jackets, who also had boom boxes, but they were a little bigger and a little louder with grunge music. Then another day, another group of kids came with larger boom boxes, and they had metal black jackets, and they held bigger boom boxes on their shoulders. Imagine watching this. Music became very loud with all these genres of music next to the obelisk, and I sensed some rivalry between them. So this is when I absolutely became fascinated. During this time, the city of Santa Fe was being graffitied with red circles with A's inside of them. And then later, black X's were marked on the inside. So I went to the plaza, and I asked the kids, what does that mean? And they said, well, it's the punkers, and they're painting the red A's. Well, what does that mean? It means the essence of anarchy. So the metalheads were the ones adding the black X's, and they called it a symbol of disobedience. So in the 80s, I went to the plaza more often just to check the dynamics of this youthful subculture friction. After all, I was an adolescent psych nurse, right? So at this time, my friend Gershon was a screenwriter, and I visualized, well, maybe he could write a play about, Romeo and Juliet and West Side Story combined theme and base it on the Plaza kids. And so I thought, well, why don't we do something like Romeo and Julia in a Southwest Side Story? The rivalries. Well, I had never produced theater before, but I was certainly very ambitious. So we later did create and manifest the play. Gershon wrote it. It was called Romeo and Julia in a Southwest Side Story, and it became a whimsical musical of punk, metal, and hip hop, an emulation of the Plaza Kids. Music and lyrics were created by local musician Jeff Nelson. It was a sold-out show at the Armory for the Arts. It was my first $10,000 theatrical production, and under the auspice of Kids Actors Workshop. And I always thought it should be a Broadway musical. It's really, really good. The acting crews included the Adobes, sorry, this is the next slide, that were the breakdancers, a group of locals raised in Santa Fe who lived in the barrios. The Condos were the punkers, and they were a collective of out-of-town transplants whose wealthy families bought the barrios. And the heavy metalers, the metalheads, were the ones who got into everyone's business by believing that metal power ruled above else. So it's a really fun production. In 1984, Apple Computer began selling its first Macintosh model. So in 1986, we created another play called The Megabyte Dream, Alice Through the Microchip. This is the cast here, and the actors, they lived inside a computer and locked documents in the hard disk dungeon at the lost data of Siliconia, the fringe area. Well, these theatrical journeys ended up taking me to Visualize More Theater, which I co-founded, called the Santa Fe Performing Arts School and Company, from 1988 to 1993 with Kathy Rowe and Frederica Johnson. We featured hundreds of young people, children, teens, young adults, and adults. Actually, alums took on the leadership of the organization in 1993 when we left, and it functioned for 25 years until they lost their venue in 2018 here in Santa Fe, typical of loss of venues. Our first show that we did was at the Greer Garson Theater, and it was called Peace Child. It was a musical featuring the fears of a nuclear war with America and Russia. This photo includes kids seeing a nuke bomb go off, and then they die on stage under red lights and smoke. We had about 80 kids in this show. Santa Fe Performing Arts had other shows, like 21 other shows at the Army for the Arts, James A. Little Theater, and at the Greer Garson Theater. A few shows are Cuckoo's Nest, Hair, Rats on Dracula, West Side Story. We did Pippin and, just 20 other productions that were really sold out, beautiful shows. Also in the mid-'80s, I was a private duty nurse for Georgia O'Keeffe and Buddy Fulkerson, Greer Garson's husband. So those are two other journeys, by the way. The 80s and moving into the 90s were the days before so much technology changed everything. Kids were adapting to CDs, floppy disks, VCRs, flip phones, radios, record players, and more. MySpace. They hung out on the Plaza. At the time, my son was doing a band called Mobius Trip. It was very popular in town, and they floated on over to LA to get recorded by the Dust Brothers, who produced the Beastie Boys. Well, my son at the age of 18, because the Dust Brothers thought he was such a good guitar player, asked him to audition for Beck. He got the gig. He performed for Lollapalooza under the production of Perry Farrell with Jane's Addiction, and he toured around the 33 cities in Europe. And then Perry Farrell asked him to perform in Porno for Pyros that same year. So he got some world experience doing that. So anyway, back on the 80s, the kids performed on the Plaza, the mall, the Aztec Cafe. They went to the Candyman before the fire. They hung out at bookstores. They went to the Echo Drive-In. They hung out at the Cross of the Martyrs in Diablo Canyon and had big shows and created havoc. Actually, this is what you find out later, right, is youth climbed buildings at night, including the Lenzik, the Cathedral, Masonic Lodge, Santa Fe Village, and the Water Tower. Oof, risky. One night, Kurt Cobain played at the Rockin' TP in 1989, and he performed with the local band 27 Devils Joking that are still popping up, playing here in town. Many of our kids were always busted with marijuana, and AIDS and HIV were affecting their lives because they were losing their parents and friends. All right, in the 90s, there were the Plaza Rats. I got to know the Plaza Rats. It has been said that the Rats actually started in 1970. So who were the Plaza Rats? Not to be derogatory, but we called ourselves the Misfits and the Homies and the old school kids on the block. There were so many diverse, radical, and eccentric teens and young adults who met at the Plaza every day in mass groups. Actually, on the wall outside, you'll see what kind of havoc they created, and why the city started to ban it, because I couldn't talk about it all today. They were free thinkers and budding entrepreneurs, dumpster divers, lowriders, cholas, cholos, vatos, locos, punkers, metalheads, breakdancers, zip-heads, tranks, goths in trench coats, skateboarders, bikers, cruisers, the homeless, res kids, Christians, devil worshippers, spoitsters, hanger-outers, buskers, wannabe gangsters, prep kids, and mainstream youth. Years later, youth helped design the De Vargas skateboard park after skaters were banned after many, many years. My son was now a teenager in the 90s, and his various bands, like I said, played all over town. And anyway, he's a well-known metal guitarist now. At the age of 18, in 1993, I left the Santa Fe Performing Arts and my nursing career and became a managing director for the CCA Teen Project, later called CCA Warehouse. The teens didn't want to be called Teen Center. So I worked with Chrissy Orr at the time. The CCA rented a 3,500 square foot old building that we paid $1 a year that was given to the Catellus Corporation at the time that owned the rail yard. And this is the aerial view prior to all the demolition and the revitalization of the rail yard. This is the 3,500 square foot building. That big parking lot, we used to do a lot of circuses and shows, and across the tracks there is site Santa Fe, and the new building of warehouses on that property. This is the side of Warehouse 21, and that's how you get into the parking lot, into the city. See how close we were to the neighbors? The concert hall was right there. Imagine the neighbors listening to grunge and punk music. Well, the tenant that lived there complained so much and called the police that we had to halt our music shows for a while. But the owner really liked us, so he kicked that tenant out and put in a hearing impaired tenant in there. That's how you do it. So we held lots of events in there, like concerts and art shows and circuses and lowrider shows. We had a screen printing studio there that produced a lot of t-shirts. You'll see some samples. We had a homemade recording studio and a dark room, a few offices, and the screen printing studio was an old shed. It had leaks and mice, and it was uninsulated, falling apart, and we kept warm by an old propane tank. People used to call this building the Shack, where both CCA and Warehouse were. The youth kept it very colorful, of course, with major graffiti and tagging. And they used to say it was the punk, homey, heavenly haven and a community home away from home. People would drive by and say, what the heck's going on in there? A lot of people thought it was like the CBGB in New York. If you look at the website, you'll see all the pictures. And some folks would say, wow, this looks like my people in there. And parents would come in and say, is it safe? And actually, many parents and donors got very involved in Warehouse 21. This is a known feature here. The youth had put in a bathtub that was outside our door in a funky old shed, and we used that to clean with mops and screen prints. We had no sinks there except the old bathroom sinks. Another feature was the, we got a grant because of all the graffiti in town. We built a 10-foot by 20-foot free wall out in the parking lot. It was used a lot. And you know what? It worked. It really abated graffiti from being around town. We used to have a sign. If you create signs that communicate with young people, they kind of behave a little better. So we had signs all over: respect Warehouse 21, no drugs, no alcohol, no violence, no tagging, no kidding. So a few stories to tell you. One time a staff member forgot to put the answering machine message on, which they normally did, these teenagers. One weekend we had a big festival and no one put it on, so I went, okay, I'll do it. And so I read the press release and I went, oh gosh, alrighty then. Phone message: tonight, Friday, 7 to 10 p.m., Warehouse 21 and the Promoter Circle present the bands As I Lie Dying, Filth, Decapitated, The Vibrators, and Chopper Sick Balls. Saturday from 4 to 10, we present Cephalic Carnage, The Fleshies, Watch Them Die, Condemn the World, Jucifer, Fuck Rot, Catheter, and Teen Tragedies. Both shows are free. So the second story is one night, Site Santa Fe, our neighbor across the tracks had an outdoor fundraiser with Sonic Youth. Well, the tickets were $50. We couldn't afford $50. So we created our own tailgate party in our parking lot, which was, right there. And we thought, well, we can hear Sonic Youth from there. So we had our own punk bands and our old hip-hop bands. And so, of course, Sonic Youth saw a lot of kids and saw the graffiti. And they said, well, what's going on over there? And they said, well, that's a teen center, And they said, well, we need to get them in for free. So these are some of the kids. They look kind of out of it, but anyway, they're drooling, and Sonic Youth guys giving out 100 free tickets, right? And so we all got to go, and we strolled over to Site Santa Fe, stirring some dirt. One kid got us in trouble because he climbed a pole and he thought he was a monkey, but that's a whole nother story. So when CCA closed in 1996, I created its legacy and started a new nonprofit called Santa Fe Teen Arts Center, DBA Warehouse 21, and I became the executive director. And so much credit to CCA. We wouldn't be here without them. I was also part of doing a lot of murals in Santa Fe back in the day. The city gave out lots of money to nonprofits. Warehouse did 24 murals around Santa Fe. And there's only 5 left, but there's one on Alvord Elementary School of the train, the history of the rail yard. We did 5 city buses inside. This was the Native American youth bus. And we did the Fort Marcy lamplighter mural, which got erased, and the prairie dog murals at Franklin Miles that got erased. I also, in 1996, was a co-founder of Zona del Sol, a group of young directors, including Warehouse, Earth Care, Santa Fe Children's Museum, YMCA, and Fine Arts for Children. We raised $2.6 million for 5 acres of land, and that's where you see the Boys and Girls Club and Earth Care across from the Southside Library today. And so anyway, we got that started in 96 because we knew that there was going to be an influx of teens in 10 or 20 years later. Let's go into the 21st century, 2000 to 24. During these years, youth experienced totally different social issues in the last decade. This 21st century became fearful after 9/11, experienced 2-year COVID pandemic, which created a lack of education. Well, what's going to happen now with robots and A1 in their future? Due to the plethora of addictive social media and internet access these days, behaviors have led to many isolation and depression. And if you didn't know this, there's a new dictionary word called brain rot in the Oxford Dictionary. Look it up. They also witnessed the scare of Y2K, global wars, genocides, historic climate disasters, kids killing kids in schools, and an insurrection. And of course, the drugs of choice today are opiates and fentanyl. Vaping and marijuana is often used. Real quick, in 2006, I was hired by the city of Albuquerque. They hired me to create a new Warehouse 21 in Albuquerque. It opened in 2009. It's called Warehouse 508 right now. Look them up. It's really an amazing place. This is me in 2007, the day before our old shack was going to be demolished to make way for the rail yard. And all I could say to myself was, oh my, what have I done? This was the concert hall. And of course, we had egg crates on the ceiling. You can see a little bit of Meow Wolf in here. But yeah, our whole building was like that inside and out. But this was the last night of our show before demolition. A lot of the graffiti looked like that around the whole building. And yeah, this is more graffiti. The last day that we were there, we had a paint party. So that's a bunch of paint flown all over the place. And that's the screen printing studio. That was kind of a classic shot with the guy just standing there. That's some pictures of demolition. That was the big youth face that we painted on the wall on purpose so that when the cat actually chewed the brick, the base would start crumbling. And then that's when I started the $1 million fundraiser, which we ended up getting by the city. There's the end of the era right there with the building down. So we ended up raising $2.4 million for this new building, which is right next door to where we were before. And Warehouse raised $1.4 million, and the city gave us $1 million. So it was a 17,000 square foot building, and it's across from the farmers market today. You can't miss it. The city of Santa Fe owns it, and we moved in there in 2008 after a long year of relocation. We also have allowed youth to paint murals. It wasn't so taggy oriented. We commissioned youth to paint murals on this new building. You'll maybe notice some. This one was a tall West Side photography, wheat pasted, of kids that were activists in climate change. Oh boy. So, you know, we tried to prevent tagging from all over the building, and after a while they started tagging with magic markers and spray paint in the building, you know, like in the lobby and all that. So we had like teen peers always on the sniffing for spray paint and getting kids caught, and they had to do community service and repaint and everything. Well, it was kind of went out of control. So we decided, well, your place then is the bathrooms. So this is the bathroom. And we did a one performer concert in there one time, and it was really fun. Keyboard. Oh, and then the tourists. You gotta come if you're a tourist. We had Val Kilmer and Greaves and Harry Lloyd with Manhattan Project. We had a lot of people come to get their pictures just because of the bathrooms. That one's classic. That's the boys' bathroom. That was the guy in the bathroom. We had to clean it up when we moved out, so that wasn't fun. Anyway, the building that we built, we were in there for 11 years, but the city had us move out in 2019 because they wanted to sell it. But sadly, it was neglected, and it's been homeless. The homeless moved in and tore out some copper piping and did other damage inside. But I hope that a new arts and cultural group will come in soon. There's an RFP for the city to make that decision soon. But even without a home base, we have carried on, Warehouse 21, since 2009 with outreach to organizations and schools, and we've served over 600 youth. So you need to check out our website to learn more on the things that we used to do. So what became of these young creatives that we used to work with? They now range from 20 to 50. We kept them from going into detention and prison, they said. Some said we prevented them from suicide. Some said programs helped them with depression. Many today are professional musicians like Beirut, Minus the Bear, Ken Valdez Brand, who plays with ZZ Top, local bands Boom Roots, Alex Mariel, and my son's band Necrot, who travels all over the world. Well, who are they today? They are today's record label producers, co-founders of Meow Wolf, opera singers, technical managers in theater, New York Times journalists, computer programmers, theater directors, DJs, sculptors, comedians, executive directors, Santa Fe poet, laureate, jewelers, muralists, tattoo artists, filmmakers, photographers, SAG actors, film crews, and social media, and more. And also, some are city councilors, judges, county commissioners, school board members, principals, firefighters, scientists, physician assistants, dog walkers, farmers. One was the governor of Nambe Pueblo, chefs, dentists, drone operators, political and social activists, lawyers, and some remain homeless. Interestingly, when I see them today as adults, I just remember what they looked like as teenagers and what they wore. It just doesn't go away. I just know them. So when 50 of our friends died through the 2 decades from suicide, drug overdose, accidents, diseases, and murders, we held special ceremonies with the spirit energy of the Aztec dancers. Recently, with 4 deaths in 2004, one Lam Serana, you have buried many of us. I cry every time. In December 2021, I hosted a 25-year anniversary retrospective exhibition at Vital Spaces featuring memories of the rail yard in 2 buildings during 2 different centuries and 2 different types of cultural shifts. My basement is full of that and 2 more galleries of historic ephemera. I plan to do someday with creating a magazine of my stories of youth culture in Santa Fe. There's so many quirky stories. Every item, every flyer, every document tells you a whole bunch about a bunch of information. So if there's any donors who want to help support an ephemeral publication, you can let me know. Due to the daily chaos with local bands, mosh pits, headbangers, drummers, rehearsals, and graffiti kids, staff chuckled and actually created this internal sign. What does it say? Better our house than yours. I also, if you want to look at this, wrote this book because of all the mosh pits and everything. We couldn't understand the lyrics, so we did several of these kind of publications that showed what the bands were actually singing. I kept asking the punk bands, can you kind of like do a white bouncing ball with the lyrics? But they refused. They were too, radical. So anyway, please look at the flyers. I have thousands of flyers. Check the Warehouse 21 website to learn more and see a lot of diverse energy, radical. There's stuff out there. And I want to ask real quick, who used to go to Warehouse or cross paths that's here today? A few people? Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you for being here today. I see Greg Malone. He was a former operations and program and IT director. Ray Gallegos, artist and maintenance guy. Patty Burke's son. Alana, photography.
I'm more tagged along with my older sister, Vaughn, who was in some of the plays.
Oh, Vaughn Irving?
Vaughn Henry.
Oh, Vaughn Henry? Okay, cool. Jackie M, are you here? She used to do radio, Ground Zero. Chris Nail, who used to do the Dark Room. Monty, over here, who's doing video, did the testimonials of young adults this summer, asking teens what they experienced at Warehouse 21. So anyway, I could talk forever. I have so many stories I think that you would laugh at and cry at, but I only had 20 minutes, so. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This was just a really amazing look back, and we have some time for some questions and answers. You want to get up and do a Q&A?
Sure.
Anybody have some more questions to ask? Anna.
All right, well then. How many of you as teenagers and young adults were hippies? How many of you were punkers? How many of you were rappers? How many of you were valedictorians? How many of you were breakdancers? Dancers? How many of you played with computers and gadgets and cords? Oh, look at that. All right, well, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to say when I moved here 9 years ago, I used to teach improv in Chicago, and I brought to you the importance of getting our youth together, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and you were so gracious, and I got to teach an adult class and a youth class at Warehouse 21, and you saw my vision, and coming fresh out of Chicago, you were an open hug, and I appreciate that so much. I guess my question would be, what does the future hold? Like with our youth now, I work at the district attorney's office, juvenile crime is up incredibly. What can we do now?
Well, a lot of the kids that we worked with, we had a lot of community service kids that were, troublemakers and broke the law. So we allowed a lot of community service, and then the young people had to take workshops and learn from the mentors. One time we did a paños art show. Does anyone know what paños means? Paños is handkerchief in Spanish, and this is what prison inmates will do to communicate with their family. If they're illiterate, they'll use their blood, they'll use ashes, they have pencils. They'll paint on handkerchiefs their expressions of love and pain. Well, anyway, it's kind of come through the generations where teenagers were actually learning from their incarcerated parents and uncles. And they ended up in detention here in Santa Fe. So we did quite a few workshops with the detention center, and we would mount their own paños art show, and we would place it up on an exhibition, we'd video the exhibition, they got to see the exhibition because they couldn't attend, and then they made all the money. So, I think there's a lot of, my cousin is the deputy director at the Penn, so I keep pushing, wanting to do stuff. But I think if you want to talk, I think there are things that we can do. The city has a new teen center on the south side of town. It's a lot different than what we used to be. I mean, we were risk takers. I'll tell you, those kids got me in trouble all the time. But we resolved it, and there was a lot of healthy dialogue, and the city loved what we did anyway, because we knew we were changing behaviors through bad behavior. So, but the future, if Warehouse had some new funds, man, I'd create new leadership and we could do some unique programs. There's so many things that people don't do with their kids that should be done. And so, yeah, that would happen if we had an infusion of funds. You know, the Albuquerque program I was talking about that I helped create with the mayor, Chavez, they get $200,000 a year from the city. So that's called sustainability. Yeah. Question? Hi.
Hey, is there a specific story of impact that you think about that stays with you as you think of the work you've done with youth?
The impact is pretty much how they say, thank you for being there for me. I am alive and I am here because of what you all taught us. It led to their future lives. I mean, all these creatives that I mentioned, the recording studio artists, the musicians, they all started from Warehouse. And if you have to provide an opportunity, if you don't have an opportunity, you don't have a chance. And we used to do more with less. If kids said, I want to do an art show, and we didn't have a whole lot of money, I'd say, well, there's an old paintbrush over there, and there's some old canvases you can paint over. I mean, you know, they would go and find the material, and then we would also give them backbone support. But I think the do-it-yourself was so important. Right now, kids are so self-absorbed and distracted with social media. It's just a different kind of kid today. But they are creative. There's some brilliant kids out there today. They just need to build. They just need something more, I think. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm also from Chicago. And I have this vision for Santa Fe that it'll become more bicycle friendly. There's a program called Safe Routes to School, and Santa Fe has not jumped on the bandwagon. And I feel like kids these days are kind of trapped in cars, they're trapped in their parents' cars. And if there were better, safer routes to school, it would be an outlet. That's one thing that we could potentially do. And because it actually saved me from suicide in Chicago. It was just riding a bike and having an outlet and being able to be independent and away from my parents. So the second thing is, so in Ireland, they have Irish sessions where like they give every kid a tin whistle. Sounds stupid, right? But like kids play together in musical sessions, and all over the world there are Irish sessions that bring kids together in a creative way that it stimulates their brain and it helps them to work together. And it has done so much for my brain playing in an Irish session. I've been playing in an Irish session for 20 years. We have an Irish session in Santa Fe, but I think we need what's called a slow session in Santa Fe, actually, to get beginners musical. So 2 thoughts, anyway. And I was going to ask, I had a question. What's the deal with wheat paste? Because I think like graffiti is this expression, this artistic expression, but it's so bad for the environment when you're using spray paint all over the place. So I was like really excited about the wheat paste photograph mural that you showed.
Yeah, that's biodegradable. But after it started to look like a mosaic after a while, because it started cracking from the weather, I think someone put some glue over it. Oh, that was so hard to get off. We had to pressure washer it. But typically, it comes off pretty easily with pressure washing. But we had to dig off the glue. It had wallpaper glue or something. And it was bad. But yeah, it's good. It's very biodegradable. It's just flour and some other ingredients.
Make it
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah. You can look it up and find out how to make it. Sopapilla. Yes. Chris. Is that Chris? Oh, it's Doug.
Yes, hi.
Oh my God. Oh, I haven't seen you in 20 years.
I think we got to know each other when I was at the public school.
Yes, yes.
Mwah. So I want to ask you, what really do you feel like sustains you personally? Not just in the work you're doing with kids, but in your life in general. What are the things that really sustain you in your spirit and your energy and your positivity?
Aw. Well, my journey here says eternity. I don't know. I just have a vitality that's kind of natural. I have a lot of energy. I love young people. I don't know why I focus on youth so much. It's probably because that's where we began. I love to write. I think I'm getting more and more into wanting to write more. I love consulting and helping other people. I love sleeping in the morning. It was really hard waking up this morning. I had anxiety dreams where I was in Arizona the day before, trying to get rest before being here, and then my car, I couldn't figure out where I was, and the people that were there weren't getting me here, and I was going to call Tracy and say, you got to read it for me. So I like sleeping in. But I love working with nonprofits. I do have a lot of skill in nonprofit there, and I'm thinking, well, what can I do to make a difference again, you know? I think that this whole displacement with Warehouse 21 has been really hard for me, and it's only been 6 years, but it's like a divorce or a death, and they say usually it's 6 years to take care of yourself. So I'm feeling a lot more free right now, so I'm ready for anything. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Good to see you. See, I remember people when they were younger. I know their faces, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna.
Oh, one more.
Oh, we got one more? Great.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you about succession, but it's obvious that we live in a different world now, and one person in 2024 cannot accomplish what you were doing in the 80s and 90s. So the question becomes one of organization.
Mhm.
Like, how can you imagine the people that recognize the value of programs like this in the next mayoral body of this city? How are you getting, how do you imagine them getting together?
I'm actually connected with Meow Wolf Collective, and a lot of the kids there are co-founders. And so if I had the funds and new leadership, I think there's some key people there that would know exactly what it is to create that essence of what Warehouse 21 is in a new age. It's a different age, and that's the end, folks. Yes?
They're here.
What?
They're here. They're in this room.
Who?
The people you're talking about.
Oh, yes, and any of you. Yeah, come on over. come on over and visit me in my basement. You'll have fun. I have a room almost half this size full of stuff. But anyway, that's a good conversation.
We can get on your list.
Oh, yeah, if you want my memoir of Georgia O'Keeffe, and if you want a memoir of my buddy Fogelson Gregarson, or if you're interested in funding or talking about a new warehouse with new leadership and everything, there's a little sign-up sheet, and just put, memoirs by two, or youth publication, Warehouse 21, just sign up there, and then I'll reach out to you. It's time to have fun. Age doesn't matter. It's not how old you are, it's how you are old. So, thank you so much, everybody, for coming.